remember that when things get rough, you can always leave over there and come here to Sankofa Books and sit down and relax. Because this is the liberation space and the liberation zone.
We want you to know that this experiment in a kind of classroom and workshop way is going to continue. We're planning the second, third installment. This first installment is really assessing our individual, collective, communal position towards the Pan-African past and towards the Pan-African future. So what we're trying to do here is, as you know, I think, and I've said this last week, Pan-Africanism is a key in this whole global contradictions that we are facing with the world. It's a movement that got derailed and lost, and we need to connect with it in the way we connect with our umbilical cord. And as far as I'm concerned, it is going to be, once we put it in a disc form, it's going to go all the way to England and Africa for people to really use it as a study book. And we will involve a lot of community people to even beyond the DVD that we are organizing now. This young man is working like hell. Beyond the DVD that he's putting together, we're going to do a guidebook, etc., that will supplementary stuff that would go with it. And so it's a very ambitious project. And for us, Professor Leo, we call Uncle Leo now, because he's really our link to everybody we missed. Du Bois, Garvey, Nkrumah, Lumumba, the spirit and souls, yes, and all the sisters who have always worked for this Pan-African collective stand, position, confidence, in whatever endeavor we and our young futures want to go into, so we don't get lost in the soup. Always to come and see that we have an interest. And so we're very grateful for Professor Leo for agreeing to do this first and second installment, what I call from the personal to the collective, because there is no collective without the individual. Sometimes we get lost in the mass, in the collective, and the individuals get lost, they get alienated. So this whole idea is taking the collective, the family, the personal, into the collective struggle of Pan-Africanism. And he's the best bridge for that. And thank you, Professor, for again the second day of lecture, and it's your forum now. You guys,
I just rushed away from a meeting in Montgomery County to be here. I got wet, and I'm trying to drink some lemon to clear my throat. So, but in a little while, I'll be okay. As usual, welcome. Delighted to have you again. And I want to take a few minutes just to do a quick review so that we don't lose the connection between the events there, so that there's a continuity. When I was leaving last week, I gave you a problem. I asked you to think about it, and I'm going to see if anybody even remembered to think about it. The problem that I gave you, I said, imagine you're in New York City, and you're by the Empire State Building, and somebody, a madman, comes up to you. But you don't know he's mad at first. But he puts a gun to your head, and he says, go with me, and he takes you up to the top of the Empire State Building. And as he's going up with you, he starts rambling, talking, so you come to realize I'm dealing with somebody who's mentally disturbed. this person is mentally disturbed. That is very obvious. Symptoms are very obvious. So you know that. The person is mentally disturbed, but they have a loaded gun to your head. They take you to the top of the Empire State Building, and they say to you, jump or I shoot. How would you react to that scenario? Because that is the scenario we are in. Right?
Especially those who were here should be able to even recall it.
Right. So I would like anybody who gave a thought to this to just tell us their idea. How would you react in that situation? A gun is to your head. The gun is held by somebody who is mentally disturbed and says to you, jump from the top of the Empire State Building, jump or I will shoot. What do you do? Yes. No acting, you're not in this.
Yeah.
No, you're an observer.
You said that we don't find out, I don't find out that he's really mad until we start going up the stairs.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Well, first place, you pull a gun on me, that means you're mad,
Okay.
number one, okay? And my first thing is to, I hope I don't sound ridiculous, but as an individual, this is what I would do.
Yeah, sure.
I pull forth all my spiritual intuition that I can at that very moment, you know, to gauge what am I feeling from this person. Is there a chance I can get away from him? Can I talk him out of doing whatever he wants to do to me? If I feel that no, that can't be done, and I don't know what's going to happen if we go upstairs, we have to fight there. For me, we have to fight right there, because I'm not letting you take me anywhere.
No. The problem is that he has already taken
The scenario.
He's already got me upstairs.
That's
Yeah.
upstairs.
We are both going over the side. If I'm going, we are both going over the side. You know?
That's fair enough.
Yeah.
Who else?
That's fair enough. That's all right. Anybody else gave any thought to this? No, let's be honest. First of all, in this group,
because I mean,
let them say in this group, we need to speak honestly to each other.
really?
We are all busy. And if you forgot, just say, I was busy and I didn't have time.
She summarized.
All right.
Basically,
Right.
No, so go ahead now.
she summarized basically that would be my approach to it.
You agree with her? Okay.
I would plead with him. Plead with him. You know, I know he's sick. I know he's deranged. I know he's mental, but I would plead with him. You know.
Give me an example of the pleading you do.
Why? Is there anything I can do? What do you need? What do you need? What can we do? Let's talk about it. I mean, I'm just saying, you know, I know the person is irrational at this point, but you know, for me, it's not as straightforward as be shot or jump. I would have to plead, you know, in some way, you know, whatever you need, you know, what can I do? That type of thing.
Well, let me just, can I interject? You want to get in, I think. Go ahead.
Well, adding to what they have said, I think I would personally put myself in his shoes, why he's mad, to understand why he's mad.
You can't do that. You're not mad.
No, but I mean, you can try to understand why he's mad.
No, you
To drive me to jump.
Why he's mad. Understand?
If I don't have the chance, then I'll tell him to shoot.
What about if we use what he gave us? I'm not going to answer it too, because I think as a script writer, I have many options. And,
Yeah.
Yeah, to
you know,
shoot.
that's like the poet there who would do that. But how about what he told us? First, what did he say? You study the enemy. You don't underestimate. The formulas, the formula he gave us. What about thinking those things? And then also knowing thyself. Knowing oneself, knowing not to overestimate. All these things he gave us, which are very important, the yin and yangs of warfare. Because we're talking in the end with the adversary that is irrational. You know, whatever we think, Europe, when it landed on Africa, it's an irrational act. You know, and to me, the madman symbolizes how Europe landed on Africa. In the end, we are paying for it up to now. And so I would just say he gave us, I think, the step-by-step, studying every move of this person.
How long do you have to do that?
Well, throughout the opportunity you have all the way,
Oh,
because
yeah.
his scenario went all the way up to the top.
All right, well, let me just go. We don't have a lot of
I have a
time.
question.
Go ahead.
You're close to the edge. The guns are at your head, correct?
I don't know where you are. All I know.
Okay, so
You're on the roof.
I'm thinking,
I don't want beyond that.
I'm
You're on the
thinking
roof.
I've exhausted talking to him. He's got me to the edge. There's a possibility, small mathematical chance, the gun could misfire. If I go over, I'm definitely going. So I would let you grab him. I face the gun, but not going down. It's a small possibility the gun could not go off. Maybe might get misfired.
No, let me just cut it and tell you. Because this is not as far-fetched as you think. This is the reality of our situation today. And that is why when I tell people we are into a psychiatric mode, this is not just a matter of a military man confronting a military man, two military men confronting each other. You know, you have a bigger gun, but we are into a psychiatric mode. We are dealing with, remember I told you, they were once 40%, then they went to 30, then they went to 20, and their own people tell them that they're going to 15. Right? On a global scale, these people have gone off. So the tactics that you used to use, not the same. You can't engage a madman into a rational discussion. That is a waste of time. Right? You can't engage him in a rational discussion. All right. The first decision you have to make, I'm not going to jump. Because if you jump, you're dead. So you have to make that firm decision. I am not going to jump. Now, having made a decision you're not going to jump, you have to keep your cool. You have to be in control of yourself. You cannot let the madman be in control of you. You have to be in control of yourself, and you have to say to yourself, I have to bring this man under my control, mental control. Right? Right?
I'm just laughing because this sounds like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama. I just couldn't, I just saw it last night, but go ahead.
Now, what that means is, in the psychiatric mode, that means first you have to establish a point of contact with this person. So you have to look very quickly and act very quickly and think very quickly. You know, if you see that he has a picture of a child in his hand, it means that he has a child, then you decide you have a child, whether you have one or not. You're going to have the child right away. Because now you have found a point of contact, right? If you notice that he has cigarettes in his pocket, all of a sudden you become a smoker. So you've got to establish a point of contact with this man. Let us assume that he has a cigarette, or he in his hand or in his pocket. You say to him, listen, I'm going to jump. Because if you tell him, sucker, I ain't jumping, he shoots you. If you get aggressive, you cannot get aggressive with a madman. You send him over the brink. You have to be very calm and say to him, I am going to jump. But before I jump, I just want to share a minute with you. Can we have a cigarette together? Because the thing I like most in life is cigarettes. And he will understand that because he is a chain smoker. As you smoke the cigarette, he's going to be smoking and puffing very hard. Using up the cigarette, you're going to be puffing very slow. So that when his cigarette is finished, you're not half finished yet. No, no, this may sound childish, but this is reality. Eh? All right. When he's finished his first cigarette and reaches for his second, and you are still on your first, you say to him, one of my peculiarities is that I don't enjoy a smoke unless I have a glass of water. Can you get me some water? Because you're buying time. Right? You have to get him. Now, whether he wants to go get the water, because if he's foolish enough to go get the water, you're gone. Right? If the water is close by and you don't have to go, he brings the water. But the whole idea that you have to remain extremely calm, you have to exercise total self-control, you have to be very confident that you're going to get away, and don't panic, and you have to bring him under your control with a view of getting the gun away from him. Because your primary objective is to get the gun away from him. Once you get the gun away from him, you are safe. No, some people are going to be so upset that when they get the gun, they're going to shoot him. But you don't have to do that. When you get the gun away from him, you can always say to him, you see, I know how to gun and I could shoot you. But I'm not going to shoot you. Because. And you can become right, try to explain to him. But first, you have to decide, I'm not going to jump. Then you have to talk him down, right? That is to say, you first have to remain. That's why in the 60s we used to tell students, you cannot get anybody together if you are not together. Until you learn to exercise self-control and self-discipline and organize yourself, you cannot organize anybody. You can't go out and mobilize and organize, and if you are not together. That is why we're going through these preliminary exercises. Because you have to get yourself together and be very clear of who you are and what you are doing and what your objectives are. And you're going to have to make decisions very quickly on very small amounts of evidence. And if you make the wrong decision, you're in trouble. Right? Yeah. So think about that one as you go through and apply it in life. Because it is getting to the stage where we may have to build asylums for the sane.
Yeah.
We may have to protect the sane from the insane. Because the sane is becoming a minority. Because everybody is trying to imitate this madman, doing what the madman says we should do, which is just make money, do, get material things, carry on like a fool, enjoy yourself, do all kinds of stupidity. And we are doing all these things and saying we are attaining success. So a vast number of people, non-white as well as white, have gone mad. And it's not just white people. It's everybody. Whether you go to Latin America, Africa, you're anywhere. People are just going mad because we are buying into madness. And with television and the internet, it is easier to spread the madness. Right? Now, that we have to understand. Now, I want to pick up one other point. I started last week, but we got off on something else. I want to take 5 minutes on that. I said I want to discuss with you the difference between self-control and mind control. And the reason for that is, again, back to this idea that we are into a psychiatric mode. There was a time when people sought to dominate you through the use of force. They still do. They sought to dominate you by withholding the means of livelihood. They still do. But the prominent and foremost way today is mind control. Because if I shackle you in this room, anytime you break the shackle and get away, you're gone, free. You haven't changed. But if I condition your mind in such a way that you surrender all your beliefs, you surrender all your attitudes, you surrender all your values, and you accept mine, I don't need to shackle you. I can let you roam free across planet Earth. So wherever you go, I am still in control of you, because the actions of a human being flow logically from their attitudes and values. Your attitudes and your values predetermine your behavior. Right? So if I control your values, beliefs, values, and attitude. Beliefs, because human beings act on the basis of belief. You don't do anything if you don't believe it. Right? If I control your beliefs, values, and attitude, I control your behavior. I can predict your behavior with 100% accuracy. And that is where we were last week when I was talking to you about a field of psychology known as behavior modification. We now know. And the summary of it is that if we can get the world to adopt the beliefs, values, and attitudes of the dominant group can get the world to accept their beliefs, values, and attitude. The dominant group, though a diminishing minority, can still control the world. And that is why the strategy, that we have set up, but before I go to that, let me come back to that. Because last week I gave you a series of things about Hobbes versus Nicholas of Cusa. I gave you the characteristics on both sides. And I want to thank a gentleman here. But I plan to give you this later on, but he brought it this evening. What I was trying to say to you, that even within the oppressor group, there are differences of values. Right? So they're not as homogeneous as you think they are. But the gentleman wrote this, and take one and pass it around, please. Because we are now talking about the greatest African scholar, Diab, who does the same comparison between African and European. I did it between European and European. And I deliberately did it between European and Europe to demonstrate to you that there are differences within the European group. Diab does it between European and African. Right? Now, so take that home with you. You don't have to read, no, take it home with you and make it part of your library. Do we have enough?
Yes. It's 16.
Do we have enough? I'll leave these with you, so you can give it to anybody who arrives.
We got no room for skinny people?
Yes. You move back to it. This is it. If you pardon my from time to time, was I have to clean my throat.
You need water?
Lemon and honey is good.
Good.
Now, talking about mind control versus self-control. Because I did a lecture in Trinidad on this. And you know, when you're in a discipline, every discipline has its own language. And you tend to assume that everybody knows the language of the discipline. And I said something, and people got very confused, and I couldn't understand why they were confused. But let me, what I'm saying, and let me differentiate between mind control and self-control. Self-control is where you as an individual set out to think for yourself, right? And to evaluate data for yourself, come up with your own conclusions and act on them. That is to say, you do not allow anybody to control your mind for you. Not the radio, not the TV, not the Washington Post, right? You think for yourself. The essence of that is the elevation of reason and the suppression of emotion. Right? You have to be able to make objective evaluations of data at all times. Data about yourself, data about your family, data about your friends, right? And data about everybody and everything around you. Because some of us, when we get into do serious work, we begin to say, well, I knew John, I've known John for 10 years, and therefore, since I know John and he lives next door to me and we drink together every weekend, he's all right. John may be all right for drinking every weekend, but maybe he ain't all right for this. I have a number of friends, social friends, to whom I don't discuss politics and economics at all. Because we are not on the same wavelength, right? When they come to my house on the weekend as a social friend, I have known them for a long time, and I knew their parents, and at a social level, we have no problem. But I don't involve them in serious business, because they're not on the same wavelength. Now, there are people, a lot of people get in trouble all the time, because you have a job which has a specific requirements. Somebody comes in and says, I need a job. Give me a job. Okay. Fine, give him a job, but not that job. If the person does not have the skills, and not about education, skills, to perform that particular job, you say to him, well, let me put you through a training course. And when you develop the skills, I'll give you the job. But you can't give him that job before he knows how to perform the job, right? But some of us have difficulty doing that. Because somebody is our friend or relative, we give them a blight, as we say in the Caribbean. You give them a pass. Right? Not if you're doing serious business. Not if you are about serious business. Right? Now, this thing of mind control is the opposite of self-control. The central ingredient of mind control must come up with methods and techniques to cause you to elevate emotion and minimize reason. That is why, in the kind of music that we create, in order to get you to do that, we create a certain kind of music, right, which puts you in a very emotional mood, right? And what we end up with is the suspension of reason. And once you suspend reason, we can feed anything into you. Right? Now, take for example, video games and violent games. Later on, I will talk to you and give you the evidence of what I'm going to make. It has been decided that within the third world, whose population is ever expanding, we have to train this excess people to learn to kill on demand. That is written. Eh? We have to train you to learn and be willing to kill on demand at the commands of certain people. And so, for a long time, years were spent in developing games, because most people learn through games. And so we have developed these games, violent video games, where now when we go back to evaluate if it is working, young people will tell us a young boy of 8 shoots his brother of 5. And when we interview him, he says, but my brother is not dead.
Oh.
So what do you mean your brother is not dead? He said, but I saw in the game where the brother shot his brother, and when the game was over, he got up and walked again. Because at that early age, young people cannot differentiate between reality and play, an illusion, right? So we create these games where people play these violent games and learn to shoot at will. Let me tell you, for example, in the CIA, when the CIA wants to assassinate people, they make a cardboard cutout of the person, and they get the potential assassins, and they take them and they give them a gun, and knife, gun, whatever, and you shoot and shoot and you shoot and you learn, and you do it day after day. So after time, shooting that image, it becomes automatic. Usually, that is enhanced by putting them on drugs, some kind of mind-controlled drugs. And then we can condition you so that at a certain sound, the sound means you go out and kill X. And if people put you on drugs and condition you, and you have done that, you can walk out and eliminate X, and next day you have no memory of it. In Jamaica, in the 79 elections, when this government decided to overthrow Michael's Manley's government, we had a number of cases like that, where people went out and committed the most hideous and heinous crime. And the next morning, when they were caught, and the police interviewed them, the man said, sir, you're mad or something? I'm a human being. No human being could possibly do that to another human being. And he wasn't trying to lie. Because now that the thing had worn off, right? And he was a human again in all God. He says, no, sir, I am a human being. And no human being could possibly do that to another human being. And when you showed him the video of the thing, he said, no, sir, that looked like me, but it's not me. You understand that? No, that is reality. So all these games that you people are playing on TV, be careful. Studies, of course, they tell you that they have no effect. They don't. That's not true. The American Psychological Association, we have done all the evaluation, and books have been published on it. We know they damage your mind. and they damage your mind towards an objective which is not in your interest, right? Now, that is not an accident. That is based on years of research. We know how to do it. They know how, and they're doing it. And the plan is to do it worldwide using radio, television, and the internet. Okay? Now that is reality. So what I'm trying to say to you, self-control, in self-control, you maximize reason and you minimize emotion. In mind control, when you're trying to control somebody or somebody trying to control you, it's the opposite. You maximize emotions and you minimize reason. Because as most of you know, when you get very emotional, you do a lot of things that you would not do when you're not in that state. Okay? You know what I'm talking about? I see everybody nodding. I won't ask you any more questions. We just leave it at that. But you know what I'm talking about? All right? Now, so last week, therefore, we talked about worldview, two opposing worldviews, and the practical consequences of these worldviews. And this week, today, we want to talk about child-rearing practices. But I go back. Let me give you two things to think about. One, these are both from Africa. Always keep your eyes on the stars, but your feet on the ground. It means let your ambition soar, be unconfined, but never lose contact with reality. You understand that? You can have all the ambition, you can aim for the highest point in life, but in so doing, never ever lose contact with reality. The other one is a commandment which is found in every religion known on planet Earth: do unto others as you would that they should do unto you. Now, every known religion has that at its core. It is stated in different words, but in every known religion, that maxim is to be found at the core of the religion. All right. What that means now, the third point that I'm making to you is that how you train children today, how you rear and train your children today, predetermines what the society will be like 20 to 25 years from now. The behavior that you are witnessing today is the result of the training given to children 20 years ago. That is an immutable law of nature. How you train your children today predetermines what the society will be like 20 to 25 years from now. Because a society is nothing more than a collection of individuals. All right? Now, let me start off by telling you a fact. In 1954, UNESCO, they took a study with the reporter which came out in 1954. I know of this because E. Franklin Frazier who was then chairman of the department at Howard of sociology, was one of the persons involved in the study, and I got the data from him. And that study showed that the child rearing practices in Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Caribbean, and the Scandinavian countries were very similar. You hear that? The child rearing practices in Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Caribbean, and the Scandinavian countries were very similar, but significantly different from the child rearing practices of Europe, and especially Western Europe. What was this fundamental difference? The fundamental difference is that in Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Caribbean, and the Scandinavian countries, children between birth and age 7 were taught the principles of cooperation through the mechanism of games. All societies condition their people through the mechanism of games. So if you are traveling anywhere in the world and you don't have time to get around much, ask, what is your national game? Go and see that game in action, and you understand the society in which you are. On a Sunday evening, when you watch American football, you are watching America in action. Where, if I am the quarterback on a team, and my brother is the tackle on the other team, and this is the championship game, my brother has no problem breaking my damn neck or crippling me at the start of the game to get me out, so that he's to win. Because America does not know the concept of an honorable draw.
Yes.
You either win or lose. There's no such concept in the United States as an honorable draw. You either win or you lose. And therefore, America is the only country on planet Earth in which you can make two completely contradictory statements, and they're both true. You can say America is the most generous country. It is true. You can say America is the most vicious country. It is true. It depends on whether you're talking before or after victory. When America sets out to achieve victory, it is the most vicious country on planet Earth. It does not permit anything or anybody to get in its way of its objective. But after they have achieved their objective, they are the most generous country on planet Earth. They'll give you anything you want. So much so that we had a prime minister in Trinidad by the name of Eric Williams. And we were having a meeting with him about the problems of the Caribbean. And somebody jestingly said to him, "But Doc, it's a simple way to solve the problems of the Caribbean, you know. Just upset America and let them attack you. And after they destroy you, they'll give you everything you want." And Eric looked back what he said, "But what if we win?" Now imagine Trinidad, it's all in the Caribbean, people can make them kind of joke. That the Prime Minister of Trinidad is asking, "But what if we win?" And nobody, of course, could answer. You understand? Now, in a game, if my brother harms me, from the moment the game is over and his team wins, they set up a fund to take care of my wife, all my children, but after they have won. That is not theory. That is a fact. And so if you go to Russia, what is the game? Chess. Chess is a totally different game from American football. In the Caribbean, our game used to be cricket. And it gave rise to things whenever you did anything wrong, if your father or brother or cousin wanted to chide you, all they had to say to you, that is not cricket. Right? And if you were not from the Caribbean, you might have problem understanding that. But every Caribbean person understood what somebody, if they said to you, that is not cricket. They didn't say that's unethical, that's immoral. All they had to do is to say that is not cricket. Because cricket was our national game. Nowadays, if you go to the Caribbean, nobody can tell you what the national game is. So we're in a state of total confusion. They can't decide whether it is cricket, soccer, basketball, or what. So we have no national game anymore. The cricket team, which used to whip everybody, can't whip anybody now. Because they're in a state of total confusion. And the cricket team has always reflected accurately the structure and attitudes of Caribbean society. So when you see the cricket team and everybody blasting the cricket team, you're really blasting yourself, if you are from the Caribbean. Because the cricket team of the West Indies today accurately reflects the structure and attitudes of current Caribbean society. And always has. Right? Now, so what we are saying is this. The values that you inculcate into your child between birth and age 10 never leave the child. So when I hear people talk about early education, the government defines early education as starting at age 5. But that is too late. Because we now know that learning begins in the womb. And when you are pregnant, your attitudes, your state of tension or relaxation, the way you speak, the way you eat, the food you drink, all of that predetermines the construction of the child when it is born. Not only that, you can actually talk, you can play music like that to your child, and your child will come out appreciating music. We know that, we have run all those experiments. So learning begins in the womb. So if you're going to wait until age 5, you're in trouble. But the government does not intervene until age 5. So who's responsible from birth until age 5? The parents, friends. But what if you're so busy that you can't pay any attention to your child between birth and age 5? What happens then? Right? Now, in child rearing, and let me say this, I don't know, and I've looked at this thing in some detail, I don't know of any job on planet Earth more difficult than child rearing. Right? And there is no textbook written that covers the entire subject. Reading some textbook may give you some hints, but there's no textbook where you say, if I read this, I'm home free. There is no such thing. None. What is worse, if you have 3 children, don't believe that because you learned how to cope with number 1, equips you to cope with number 2 and 3. Because number 2 and 3 may be different personalities from number 1. So you have to start all over again. I know of no occupation more difficult than childrearing. But people are not taking it seriously. And some people have set up systems in such a way to make sure that you won't be available to take care of your children. Patrick Moynihan did that. You ever heard of Patrick Moynihan?
1965.
He is supposed to be the most brilliant academic senator the U.S. has ever had. And when we were at Howard and we established the Center for Urban Studies, right? Patrick Moynihan introduced something called the man in the house rule. You ever heard of the man in the house rule?
Mm-hmm.
In those days, coming out of the Roosevelt era, we had welfare, and mothers could get money if your husband wasn't working, and you could get some money to feed your family. They set up the man in the house rule. Patrick Moynihan, I know I'm being taped, but it is true. Set this up, the man in the house rule. And the woman could be given money for her and her children, provided there was no man in the house. They then sent inspectors at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning to sit across the street, disguised as hobos and other things. The husband would wait until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. He'd look, he don't see nobody, and he'd sneak in. The agent would give him an hour to settle down and get going, and then break the damn door down and go in. And the woman would lose her welfare check. So that a man, in order to ensure that his woman, whether it was his wife or not, and children, ate, disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
Professor Roy Jones and I went and met with Patrick Moynihan, and we said to him, maybe you do not understand what you have done. You have set out to destroy, consciously destroy the black family. And after we talked, you know what Moynihan said? Never uttered a word. Because in every government office, your conversations are taped, yeah? And he knew that. And his response to us was, and then he wrote a book entitled The Coming Destruction of the Black Family. Go and read it. Coming Destruction of the Black Family. And it is that book that propelled him to the point where people say he's one of the greatest intellectuals the Senate has ever seen. You set up something to happen. Then you write a book predicting that the thing is going to happen, and then tell people that you're a brilliant intellectual. You understand?
Yes.
No, that is the kind of problem we have to face.
What's the name of the book again? The Coming Destruction?
The coming destruction of the black family. And that time it was coming, now it is here.
That's right.
All right? Now, what I'm saying to you is this.
Especially a good lecture for those of you planning to have babies.
Or those who don't.
Now, I talked to you last time about dialectic. That is to say, that opposites coming together and creating something new. Huh? In child rearing, the four fundamental variables are dependence versus independence and cooperation versus competition. Right? Now, most adults haven't solved that problem. Most adults have not been able to resolve the conflict between dependence and independence, between cooperation and competition. Under what circumstances do you compete? Under what circumstances do you cooperate? Under what circumstances is dependence acceptable? Under what circumstances is dependence not acceptable? Most adults have not been able to resolve those two conflicts. Now imagine a newborn child trying to cope with these two phobias. You ain't solved it yet, but you expect a child to solve that? It's impossible. So that the responsibility of parents is not to talk about maximizing the freedom of your child by permitting them to do whatever they wish to do, whenever they wish to do it. That is total, absolute, unadulterated nonsense. A child between birth and age 5 does not have the capacity, much less the ability, to determine what is best for them, to do whatever they feel like doing, whenever they feel like doing it, wherever they feel like doing it. That is impossible. All right? So at birth, first impact on the child. Remember now I said to you also, let me remind you that learning occurs in 3 stages: imitation, trial and error, and later on conceptual thinking. The child between birth and age 5 learns by imitation. They haven't gone to school yet. Child learns between birth and age 5, learns by imitation. And I know a number of you have had the experience of going to a home, and this is a young child, and the young child calls out to his mother saying, "Mommy, the bitch is here." You that up? And the mother said, "Where did she get that from?" Where do you think the child got it from? No, it's the mother's good friend, eh? But the mother talking to her boyfriend or her husband or her sister said, "Boy, that's my good friend, but she's a bitch." The child hears it. And as far as the child is concerned, the mother can do no wrong and say no wrong. Whatever the mother says is correct and right. And worse, if it's a boy child and a father, the father can do no wrong. Whatever behavior he sees his parents engaging in is for him and her to know. Now, I wonder where he got that from. There's only one place the child got it from: parents, family, and close friends of the family. Because between age birth and age 5, those are the people who are impacting on the child in a continuous way. Right? So the things that I gave you last week, if you haven't resolved them for yourself, you're going to be in trouble in terms of rearing your child. Because you have to guide your child in terms of values, beliefs, values, and attitudes between birth and age 5. The next one that is going to impact upon the child is the church. Right? Because you're going to christen the child or do something to the child. And you're going to start taking the child to church with you. The child's going to learn to go to church and to listen to what the minister is saying. You want to want them to begin to read the Bible or something, whatever religion you are. And so, the church is going to impact on the child. Then at age 5, you're going to send the child to school. Right? And the school is going to begin to influence the child, depending on what they are teaching. And while at school, the child is going to make friends. His peers, that's what you call the peers. And by age 7 and 8, when the child has learned to read, you might have the media. Because by age 7, the child is looking at TV and listening to radio.
To music. To music.
Yes, yes. Right? And this is, the next one is cultural organizations, cultural expressions, what we call cultural expressions. That is music, poetry, books, whatever the child is reading, have problems coping with all of that in our daily lives. What do you think is happening to a child? The child therefore needs constant support and guidance. Let me simplify it for you. Just visualize this. When your child is born, you take the child home, you put the child in a crib, and you have sidebars on the crib a certain height, so that if by chance the child suddenly wakes up and stand up, which is not likely, he can't fall over. Right? There comes a time when the child starts moving around in the crib, showing signs that he or she can creep. Right? At that point, you take the child out and you put the child on the floor in the room with the doors closed. You don't leave the doors open. You close the door. And if you have a downstairs, you put a little door between at the steps so the child can't sneak downstairs. You don't leave it to the child to determine whether or not to go downstairs. Because a 2-year-old can't make that decision. He went try and go downstairs. So you put a door to stop the child from sneaking downstairs. Eventually, the child learns to stand up and walk. You still have him inside the house. You don't leave the front door open and go out. Because when you come home, your child is gone. Eventually, as the child learns to cope with the environment, his or her environment, you give the child more freedom. You then permit the child to go outside the house. But if you have some space, lawn, you have a gate, and the gate is closed. Because if you leave the child out there and the gate is open, the child is going to go out on the street and get killed. And that legal responsibility is yours, not the child's, and not your neighbor's. That legal responsibility is yours. When the child learns to walk around the yard safely, by now he's about 6, you take the child through the gate and you hold the child by the hand. And you walk to the corner and you stop. And you say to him, red means stop, green means you can go. And every time you go with your child, you do that. Red means stop, green means you can go. If you know, child, one of these, after you've done that about 10, 15 times, the next time you go, when you get to the corner, you put the child, you say, hold my leg, you don't hold the hand, hold my leg. And when the red light comes on, you see, you say to the child, what does that mean? He says, stop. When the green light comes on, you say, what does that mean? He says, go. You know what the child is now internalizing, because that's what culture is. The internalizing of particular ways of thinking and behaving in order to survive. Right? Now, culture is the particular ways of thinking and behaving which a people develop and internalize in their continuing effort to cope with their total environment. That is why cultures are different. Right? And that gives rise to cultural expressions. When you develop particular ways of thinking and behaving, you express that in clothing, in food, in music, in poetry, in all kinds of ways. Those are cultural expressions. But it flows from a particular way of thinking and behaving which has been developed by the society over time, passed on to us. And if you have not internalized it, it is not a part of your culture. That's why you differentiate between culture and fad. A fad is not a culture. Because somebody jump up one day and do something, and a number of people do it, does not make it a part of your culture until it is internalized and accepted by you as a method of survival within. It is not part of your culture. Right? Now, so look at this. How many adults have learned to deal effectively with all of these forces? If I rub out the word child and put adult in the center, how many people have learned to cope with all of these? If adults have not learned, how do you expect a child to cope? Therefore, we have, that is what it was meant, so it takes a village to raise a child. Because it meant that everybody in the damn village had their eye on the child, because anytime you saw the child veering off, you had the right to, don't do that. Don't do that. Because you're violating the cultural norm of this society. Nowadays, you can't do that. Nowadays, you don't even have the right to. If you try and tell your neighbor child don't do that, the neighbor come and wants to shoot you. You know what I'm saying? That is the destruction of the family. That is the destruction, consequence of the destruction of the family. This is what we are talking about, child rearing. That is how complex it is. So when you have a child having children, look at the increased difficulty. The difficulty does not increase arithmetically, it increases geometrically. When a child has a child who has not yet learned to cope with these things, having a child, and hence cannot guide the child. And so what we have today are parents who receive no guidance from their parents and therefore can give no guidance to their children. And I ain't talking about poor people, eh? And this, I'm not just poor people. I have a friend, a medical doctor, who has a son. And he came to see me one weekend. And I said, go and wash your face and let's go somewhere. And when I go in, he has a rag. He wets the rag. He said, I'm ready. So what do you mean you're ready? You wash your face? Yes, I did. I said, did you wash your face? I said, but I saw it. He said, well, that's what my mother tells me. When my mother said she's going to wash my face, she just wet a rag and wipe my face. And to him, that is the definition. I said, do you understand that there's a thing called soap? Do you understand that this plug can go into this hole? You can turn the water on and catch water and put the soap over your face and wash it. I said, no, I've never done that. Do you understand? This is serious business, and I'm not making this up. This is reality. We have children who have never been taught the most fundamental things of hygiene. They know nothing about hygiene. They know nothing about relating to other people. They don't know. And we are surprised by the behaviors that we observe. You understand? Until we begin to take charge of our families, starting with our children, we are in serious trouble. A person who has not developed the ability to cope with these things and has no idea how to cope cannot instruct younger people how to cope. In order to instruct younger people how to cope, you have to learn how to cope. Huh? What time is it? 8:30.
Yeah, we're not there yet.
All right. So, I want you to look at this very seriously. Let me tell you how serious this thing is. As you know, Russia had a revolution in 1917. And thereafter the West was opposed to Russia. And the elite Russians, most of them left, went all over the place. But we had one gentleman who, a leading psychologist in Russia, who came here, was teaching at Harvard, or the professor, not at Harvard, Harvard. His work in Russia had demonstrated what was known before, that the poor and the weak had never succeeded on planet Earth through competition.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The poor and the weak, nowhere on planet Earth have the poor and the weak succeeded by emphasizing competition. The poor and the weak have succeeded only when they emphasize cooperation. Now, please understand the verb I'm using is emphasize, because from time to time you have to compete. Well, you have to learn under what condition. I'm talking about emphasizing. All right. The poor and the weak on planet Earth have never progressed or succeeded by emphasizing competition. They have done so only by emphasizing cooperation. And he knew that. But when he came here, he couldn't say that, because that was contrary to the point of view of the United States. And so he did a lot of work at Harvard and published a lot of work claiming to prove that competition was much more important than cooperation. Right? And of course the New York Times and all the papers wrote him up as one of the greatest psychologists in the world. And he eventually committed suicide. Because as he did all this work, he had become an intellectual prostitute. Woo. That's what he had become, an intellectual prostitute. And though he was making much money, had worth him, he knew, nobody may have known, but he knew that he had become an intellectual prostitute. And it finally got to him, and he committed suicide. No, that is the reality of life. But we have some people nowadays who have been so conditioned that when they sell themselves intellectually, they have no sense of shame. So they go and commit no damn suicide. But to commit suicide, you have to have a sense of shame. You have to say to yourself, I have done wrong. I should not have done that. If you have no sense of guilt and no sense of shame, you can't commit suicide over that. You just keep on being a prostitute. Right? And that is where we are. There's a significant percentage of our people who have become prostitutes physically and or intellectually. So we have to start doing serious work and putting out conclusions that are based on fact, not based on pleasing anybody who can give us some money.
Or flattery.
You understand?
Or flattery.
Well, I don't difficult. Well, the flattery is easy. That one ain't easy to stop. The money. Flattery, I don't know when we'll ever get over that. You see, that's the difference between, I know people don't, I'm take it is true, you know. All my Jewish friends, when they decide to play this game, whatever the money is, you have to give them 50% up front. And they tell you, give me the 50% later. We, on the basis of flattery, do it. And after we have done it, they don't give you the money, you can't sue them. Because you can't let anybody know that you made that kind of deal. No, it's a phenomenon that I see every day, you know. So we do the most hideous things to ourselves and to our people. And we get nothing other than somebody patting you on the head and telling you how great you are, and if you ever do this, I'm going to do this for you. If you do this, I'll do this for you. We just had some negotiations in the Caribbean, which we gave away every damn thing on the basis of the European Union promising to do something for us. They ain't done it yet. But we are signing documents that are legally binding in perpetuity. In perpetuity, legally binding in perpetuity, and all we have gotten in return are promises to do something for us over the short term. No, that is the reality of our condition. And the same thing is happening in Africa. and Latin America and everywhere. So these are very, very serious times. But I'm telling you all of this, to tell you that it ain't easy. And you better understand it. So you have, I can't make up anybody's mind, you have to make up. You have to decide whether you're ready for this game or not. And if you cannot be honest with yourself, you cannot be honest with anybody else. Right? So that is where we stand. This is the critical importance. How the child is trained today, how children are trained today, predetermines that the beliefs, values, attitudes, and behaviors of society in the next 20 to 25 years. Now, if you want to neglect your children, do so, but then don't be shocked 20 years from now when they behave in certain ways. People who neglected their children 20 years ago are going around shocked that their children are doing certain things. If you have trained your children correctly, a child can't shoot his mother, or his father, or his grandfather. And every day you read in the paper children shooting their brothers, sisters, mother, father. We just had a case last week in Baltimore of a 16-year-old boy who beat his 39-year-old mother to death because she insisted that he should come home at night and study rather than be out in the street playing with his friends. And for that, took a bat and beat her to death. There was a time when that was impossible. That could never have happened at a certain point in time, based upon the child rearing practices of that time. But we have set out to tell the world that two things are important. They don't say depend because they now interpret dependence as the government helping you. And they don't plan to help you, so they say forget dependence. Independence means you must make it on your own. Go out and make it on your own. You have no means to make it, but go make it on your own. And you do it by competing with other people who are in the same position like you. And we are buying that foolishness all over the world. And telling us that government has no responsibility. The only responsibility of government is to transfer wealth to the wealthy and to make the wealthy wealthier than they are. And when the wealthy become super wealthy, they'll permit some of it to trickle down. And they've been telling us that since the 1700s. It hasn't happened, it isn't happening, it cannot happen, and we're still buying it. And every day I say, we must train our children to be competent in competition, to compete against each other over what? If you have 5 children in your house, and all you have is one loaf of bread, do you tell your children, compete for the bread? Because obviously the 2 oldest ones will get everything. The younger ones will get nothing. When we were growing up, if your parents went to the store and bought a box of crackers, biscuits, you couldn't sit in the back of the car or walk by the side of you and eat the whole damn box before you go home. You'll be mad. You couldn't do that. You had to take it home and share it with everybody. But if you went somewhere and somebody gave you a lollipop, you said, I have a brother and a sister, can I have 2 more? You understand that? No. If the child gets 3 lollipops, And when he gets home, he has only eaten 2. He hides outside until he eats the 3rd one before he goes inside. Right?
Yes.
No, am I telling the truth?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
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 No, that is the reality. We ought to wake up and understand that something has gone wrong. If you have a limited amount of food in the house, you cannot tell each child, eat whatever you want. It is nonsense. You have to take control and say, this is for you, this is for your sister. Don't touch this. No, you went and do what you want. I go in a store and I see a mother, this is a white mother, with a child that's only about 3 or 4 years old, her daughter. And she says to her daughter, go and get what you want. How the hell can you tell a 4-year-old child, go and get what you want? So the little girl goes over, because at that age, she has no concept of value. She has no concept of quality of material. All she knows is color. She reacts to color. So she goes over and she gets a red dress. She goes over and she gets a blue dress. Then she goes over and she gets a yellow dress. When the mother comes on to the she said, oh, no, I can't afford it. She said, but Mommy, you told me to get whatever I want. And I walked away laughing. How can you tell a 3-year-old child, go and get whatever you want? What foolishness is that? But we are adopting that behavior in the name of freedom. We want to raise our children so that they are totally free. So at age 3, you want to tell them, go and get whatever you want, or do whatever you want to do. How can the child don't know what to do? They need guidance. But you have to know when to let go. So to come back to the thing I was saying, that when the child gets to the red light, you don't let go of that child's hand until you know the child knows the difference between a red light, a yellow light, and a green light. Only after you are sure. And even the next 3 times when you go, you let go of the child's hand, but you're watching all the time. Only when you are satisfied that the child has learned to cope with that particular situation do you let go of the child. No, here comes the problem. Here comes the problem. Child is now 10 years old, and he lives close to school, and his friends are close by. And you go and walking him to school, particularly the boys. Mommy walking her son to school, and she's holding on to him. And when the light changed, she's still holding on to him. After he has demonstrated that he knows the difference between red light and green light. And he gets very embarrassed. And he starts pulling his hand away because his little friends say, Mommy boy, Mommy's boy. They start calling him Mommy's boy. So he gets very embarrassed. The point is we need to know when to let go. But most people don't know when to let go. It is like running a relay race. When you run a relay race, the first runner hands over to the next. But if you hand over too soon, you are disqualified. If you hand over too late, you are disqualified. You have to hand over within a certain range. Some of us don't know when to hand over. We just want to keep on going. If the first man in the relay race keeps on running, what happens? He keep on running with the baton. He don't hand it over to him. What would happen? The team is disqualified. But some of us have never learned that there comes a time when you need to hand over. And if you have an organization and you haven't trained people in such a way that they can take over. I belong to where people tell me, we had a meeting scheduled for this Saturday, but I won't be in town, so we'll have to cancel the meeting. And at that point, I leave the damn organization. If you have an organization that has been going for some time, and you have a serious meeting planned for this weekend, and because one person is going to be out of, you have to cancel the meeting, you have not functioned properly within that organization. Because it means that either it is true or you believe that the organization cannot function without you. And if you have built an organization in such a way that it cannot function without you, it means that when you die, the damn organization is going to die. Right? The proof that you have done good work is when you can say, I will be gone for 2 weeks, but keep on going. And when you come back, everything is fine. Then you know you have been doing good work. If nothing can happen in your absence, you are a failure. You have not done good work. Well, we have to know when to hand over. We have to know when to hand over. We have to know when to hold somebody's hand. The essence of good management is knowing how much supervision your workers need. That is the essence of good management. Some people need a little bit of supervision, some need a medium, some need a lot. If you go in and say, I expect my workers to be independent, therefore I'm not giving them any supervision, you're not a good manager. You can only do that if you have checked out and observed and discovered that all of your workers are self-starting. And if they are, then you can do that. You understand? But you first have to be sure who needs a lot of supervision, who needs a medium amount of supervision, who needs limited supervision, and who needs no supervision. Because the essence of management is the proper utilization of resources. That is the key to good management. The effective utilization of resources, where resources are essentially of two kinds. Well, three kinds: human, material, and financial. And how do you manage those three sets of resources? Human, material, and financial. I have people that have an organization because they don't have $10,000 in the bank. And I can't do anything because all I have in the bank is $5,000. You know, but something is wrong. You have $5,000 in the bank and you tell me you can't do anything. It don't make sense. Then you're not a good manager, and you're certainly not creative. You can't figure out, you know, a whole heap of all that I know don't have $1,000 in the bank and doing good work. Right? Doing very good work, and they don't have $1,000 in the bank. But they pool their human resources to get things done. You understand? Because you use what you have. If you are committed to a cause, you use the resources at your disposal to achieve your objective. No, I'm going to stop there. Because I'm tired and you are tired.
Well, we have some room for questions, don't we?
Yes, definitely.
You know, I just want to say just one thing. One, you know, when we came up with the idea, we just saying Pan-Africanism, you know, let's do homework. And I was thinking of Nkrumah, Du Bois, the usual, you know. And then he comes up with an outline, with this thing I call the locator of the self, the person, and our relationship to family, children. I was like saying, how is he going to hook all that? And today I'm like getting to where he's going, which is very important because you always forget this. You even sometimes wonder, why is it that a lot of our Pan-African leaders, their children, are not the reflection of what they have lived for? And so it's an amazing challenge. I mean, these are like serious issues. And so that's one. The other one I want to say, when you were talking, it reminded me, I don't know how many of you have seen it, but I think, somewhere in Europe, I saw a taping of Judge, what's the brother's name? No, the judge.
On TV?
No, the judge, the black judge, it's Supreme Court.
Clarence
Thomas made this speech. It was a kind of a C-SPAN kind of show. He did a speech in this place where Lincoln's bust sits, and he's addressing. And then at the end, he came and stood next to Scalia, and he said to Scalia, and on camera, and I don't know how many people didn't pick it. He says, "Did I do good?"
Yeah.
And Scalia said to him, "Very good, you did good." And this thing kind of like, it's like the most interesting, how you create something that is created by the same ideology, how much it craves to be flattered or, be paid back. Anyway, question. I just thought that just came to me as he was talking. It conjures up a lot of our own contradictions in situations where we go into boardrooms unaware of what's sitting across from us. I could remind you of a filmmaker who went to see Oprah because she's black. He went black, and then she had 7 white men around her, never spoke nothing, and the guy just sat across the table, unprepared to know how to deal with this ammunition that he was faced to propose his own project. And so they've created it's cultivated already. They have cloned out of our people certain consciousness, and we're in trouble. Any question now? So we go to like the nuts and bolts. And I would say, you got to know we're going towards Pan-Africanism. And this is the spelling towards the ABCD towards the Pan-African. And I like it. Brick by brick, we're constructing something to find where we dislocated ourselves. Assuming, our language unexamined, our vocabulary unliberated.
Yes?
When you first gave us the 2 lists of Hobbes and the Cardinal, I'm wondering how often and how long do people have to practice the principles on either one of those lists before we can actually stamp that as being them, being that's their core, that's them. Can we ever do that?
Yes, you can. That's what, remember I said, people's culture, nothing, if you have not internalized it, it is not a part of your culture. All right. In the physical sciences, before something can be accepted as a law, it must be able to occur 99.99% of the time. That is to say, if I conduct an experiment, anybody, anywhere in the world is free to conduct that same experiment. And unless 99.99% get the same result, it is not a scientific law. Right? It only becomes a scientific law. Now, sometimes if this problem is extremely difficult, we'll accept 99.95. Right? But the goal is 99.99. In the social sciences, it is different. In the social sciences, where you study groups, if 80% of a group does something, you are free to say the group does it. Right? So when you read social science books and they say that the laws of economics or the laws of this, it only means that we have done these experiments over and over, and at least 80% of the time we get the same result. Right? So for shorthand, when we're talking, when we say the Africans do this, if you say the Africans, you have to be able to prove that 80% of Africans do it. It doesn't mean that 100% do it. The same with whites, Chinese, anybody. Right? So over time, we do these studies. And the reason why we can say that American society does so and so, because when we do the sociological studies, we find 8% of the respondents say so and so. And if 80% of them say it, then the sociology says American society believes so and so. It doesn't mean that 100%, it means that at least 80% of them do it. Right? Now, what has happened? Remember now that this conditioning has been going on for over 500 years. Right? Take the concept, because remember where I started. I started by saying to you that Du Bois was an optimist and he thought the problem was going to be solved in 100 years. It isn't solved. It's worse. It's not just worse. We have made progress. It is worse in the sense that the proponents of white supremacy are more desperate and they are armed with nuclear weapons. Right? That is what I mean by worse. They are more desperate and they are armed with nuclear, and they are frightened, therefore more dangerous. Right? Now, when we therefore say that the American society will behave in such and such a way, we don't mean 100%. Because the conditioning to preach white supremacy, you can't preach white supremacy only to blacks. You have to teach the whites. If the whites don't believe it, then it doesn't work. Right? So you are conditioning the black. That is why when I came to this country, one of the, talk about culture shock, one of the things that I could never understand, I hear people talk about, this is a good nigger, and this is a crazy nigger. And I couldn't, how the hell do you differentiate between a good nigger and a crazy nigger? Until I went to Georgia and Mississippi. And a little man to explain it to me. He says, if you accept or appear to accept belief in white supremacy, right, and act it out, you are called a good nigger. If you resist it, you are a crazy nigger. And I said, but, and then he took me and showed me a man who was driving a car, a donkey drawn. He said, this man is Mr. So-and-so's nigger. And he comes into town every Friday to shop. And he said, he can enter any store. I said, no, we cannot enter that store. But because when he enters, that is Mr. John's nigger. And that's Mr. John's property. And if you hurt or harm Mr. John's property, you can have to deal with Mr. John, not with him. So he comes in and he's safe. He's safe. But we don't know whether he honestly believes in white supremacy or not. But what we know, he acts as if he believes. Because a lot of people who we call Uncle Tom are not genuinely Uncle Toms. They pretend to be Uncle Toms in order to survive. So we never know, as a fact. But the fact is, whether you believe it or you merely pretend to believe it, if you act out the fact that you believe in what you are, you're safe. If you resist it, and then this is what they said, the law says insanity means that you are not in contact with reality. That's what white man tells you now. Insanity, and he quotes the law to me. Insanity means you're not in contact with reality. He says every rational human being knows that whites are genetically superior to blacks. For him, that is a given. So if you don't believe that, then you are not in touch with reality. And if you are not in touch with reality, you're mad. And if you are mad, you could be a danger to yourself and others. That's what the law says. And if you're a danger to yourself and others, the police can pick you up and put you in a mental institution without telling anybody or without asking anybody's approval. During the 70s, Ackland can tell you, 60s, we had a young lady around here, very active, young black lady. And for 10 years we didn't see her, and we just thought maybe she had gone back down south. And one day I go to St. Elizabeth Hospital, to the mental hospital. And when I go, I see this lady sitting on the bench at St. Elizabeth. So I thought she was visiting or something. So I went over to her the moment she saw me. She jumped up and ran and knew who I was and hugged me. And I said to her, "You're visiting here?" She said, "No, I live here." No, she said, "No." She said, "I've been here for the past 10 years. I was leading a demonstration in Washington, and the police came and picked me. And they said, this is the 3rd time we have picked you up. So this behavior is not unusual. It shows that you have been totally separated from reality for a long time. You are therefore mad. And you are a danger, because the next time you demonstrate, we may have to shoot you. And in shooting you, we could shoot an innocent person, which means you are a danger to yourself and others. And the woman had been at St. Elizabeth for 10 years. We thought she was gone home. You understand? No, remember when I started, I tell you, I'm not here to discuss theory. I have to tell you some of the theory in order you can understand the objective data. But we are talking about life experiences. We're not talking about what could happen and what may happen. We know, we have been through this. All right. And it is worse now than it was before. All right. So that is what we are talking about. So that is what we mean. So
my question is directly related. I think my question, and I would like more of your insight on, is the role of trickery, because it's something that I feel that is part of Native philosophy, African philosophy, Asian philosophy, some kind of trickery figure. And back to the example that you gave in the beginning of the lecture of what would you do? As a parent, I find myself, well, number one, that what I do is more important than what I say.
Yes,
and number two, that my children are often with me when I'm confronted with the madman.
Yes.
They're right here.
Yes.
So I already feel at an early age that they see me involved in that buying time, in that malicia, which is something that's said in Latin America, and there's part of me that wonders, is there a time that it's developmentally appropriate? Is this something that should be there from the beginning? In this scheme here, where is this survival set that is malicia, that is trickery?
Now, that is a very important point. Depends on the age of your child. If the child is between birth and 5, whatever you say or do, whether you know it or not, that child will internalize it and will assume that that is the perfect response. And therefore, confronted with a similar situation, will do the same thing. because they learn at that age only by imitation. Right? Now, if you have done something because you, in your experience, felt in order to leave this game alive, I have to say or do something, but that is not really what I think, and that is not the way it should be. As soon as you leave the scene, you have to start explaining to the child. See, it is like punishing a child. If a child does something of which you do not approve, but only you right and wrong, of which you do not approve, and if you wait until 2 days to punish the child, no learning occurs. No learning occurs whatsoever, because the child does not know why he or she is being punished. When the child does something of which you do not approve, you have as quickly as possible to punish the child. But you have to start off by saying, this is the way I have told you, this is the way you act. You did this, you were wrong, therefore you're going to be punished. Punishment merely means sitting down for 5 minutes. You know? Because if you ask a 4-year-old to sit quiet for 5 minutes, that is punishment. You understand? All right. So, this idea that you punish the child by just saying, you did wrong, boom, 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 and walk away. No learning occurs. Because the child has no idea that what they have done wrong, and they don't know why they are being punished. If you, for punishment to be meaningful to the child has to understand why he or she is being punished, and has to understand what is the alternative to the behavior that they undertook. Because you cannot substitute nothing for something. But a lot of us keep saying to the child, you did wrong. But we don't give the child an alternative. If the child did wrong, you have to give them an alternative. Instead of doing so and so, you should have done so and so. And the child knows next time I'll do this instead of. But if you just say you did wrong, boom, boom, no learning occurs because the child still doesn't know what the alternative is. Because that reaction that the child gave, he probably got either from you, from a member of your family, or from a family friend, or somewhere. That they didn't create it out of nowhere. Right? So this is what and that's why I keep saying it's the most difficult job on planet Earth. Because the parent has to be everlastingly alert. You have to be everlastingly alert. And the other thing that parents do, you never ask questions after you've made a decision. A lot of parents, a child comes in, and now the child is 12. Mommy, can I go over to John's house tonight? Hell no, you can't go. You're not going anywhere. You haven't asked any question yet. You may have made it. No, you're not going. Child come back. Mommy, John is where I'm going. It's the son of your best friend, who you say you like very much. And I must grow up to be like him. Why can't I go? No, the parent is confused. Well, let me think about it. Then the child comes back. Mommy, I am not the only one going, you know. 3 of us are going. And the other people have all got the approval of their parents. Why can't I go? Okay, go. The child now learns that no does not mean no. That with a little bit of effort, no can be converted to yes. And a child, a growing child, is the most inquisitive being on planet Earth. And they, learning for them involves testing the limits. They are always testing the limits. And as young as they may be, when they do something wrong, and you tell them, don't do that. Go and sit in that chair. The next 15 minutes, and don't move. Like you're asking a river not to flow. The child sits there. And what does the child do?
I go to the bathroom.
She then starts looking around. And after 2 minutes, and then look around. And if you don't react to the first move, you look around. And then they look at you and smile. Smile. And they'll just smile and they'll move to the edge of the table. Right? And you still don't say anything, and they'll run over and hug you. Mommy! And they got you. Is that right?
Yes.
Yep. You experience that? Oh God, you think children are not smart? They know how to play you. They're always testing the limits. The problem is that a number of adults are not more than overgrown children, and they do the same game. They're always testing to see how far they can go. And that's why in life you have to set limits. People must know the limits within which to come. Behaviors afterwards. Because if you, until you set up limits, they are going to keep pushing. Your friend comes, I'm broke, lend me $5. You lend me $5. Next week come, I'm broke, lend me $10. Lend you $10. Next week come, I'm broke, lend me $20. After you lend them $20, you don't see them for 3 weeks. They disappear for 3 weeks. Then they come back and tell you, something happened. They're setting you up. They're setting you up. You understand? And so you have to set limits. But and children are very smart.
The boundaries.
You have to set boundaries.
Go ahead.
Yeah, yes, please.
Given that model,
Yes.
is then the role of good parents, of conscious parents, given the society that we're in, understanding that the society functions on the concept of independence and competition, then how do good parents then teach the child the concepts of cooperation and dependence, but teach them to function in the society of independence and competition?
Well, maybe what I said was, in the study, it shows this. Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Caribbean, and the Scandinavian countries conditioned the child from birth through 5 in the principles of cooperation. Right? I quoted one example, the idea of a food. You couldn't eat the food before you go home, you had to share. No, that's just one, but you can think of many. Right? How you condition a child into cooperation. Right? Some people if you have housework, you say, you do this, you do that, you do, and if it's not done, nobody goes out. So they begin to work together. There are all kinds of ways of doing it. When the child gets to age 7 or 5, between 5 and 7, you teach them competition through the mechanism of games also. But you change the game, because you begin to talk to them about teamwork. You cooperate with the members of your team. You compete against members of another team. So that the child cannot compete with his sister and brother, but they can compete with the other team. Because all societies condition their children through the mechanism of games. Games is the major mechanism through which all societies condition this. That's why different societies have different games. But those games are meaningful. Now, video game is just the latest game because we are now conditioning people to achieve a certain objective. But through games, take the Lakers. When both Kobe and Shaq were playing for the Lakers, on paper, the Lakers had the best team, but they couldn't win. Because everybody was playing for the crowd, to see who was the individual star. If you just want to be the individual star, you can do that, but your team ain't going to win. You have to learn to play as a team. Right? Now, since Shaq has left and Kobe has settled down, look what the Lakers are doing. The team that they now have is nowhere as good as the one they had when Shaq and Kobe were together. But they're winning now because they're playing as a team. And when it doesn't, Kobe scores a lot of points, but you notice he scores when the other's not scoring. So life consists of both cooperation and competition, but you have to decide with whom to cooperate and with whom to compete, and when to cooperate and when to compete. You understand? All right? But in both cases, the difference between that and the Europeans, in the Europeans is just the opposite. The Europeans, and this is what the study showed, between birth and 5, Europeans condition their children into competition. So for Africa, Asia, the foundation was cooperation. And on that foundation, they built competition. For Europe, the foundation is competition and the superstructure is cooperation. Two different models entirely. Right? Now, they are telling us that the first model is no good, only the second model. That children must be raised from birth to learn how to compete. And then later on in life, they learn how to cooperate. And we have accepted that, and that is what we have been doing to our children for the last 30-odd years. We have, all over the world, we have accepted this model. In the Caribbean, if you do a content analysis of the Caribbean literature, meaning poems, prose, anything written, the word that occurred most between the 1930s and the 70s was cooperation. Do a content analysis anytime you want. The word that occurred most since the 1980s, the word that occurs most is competition, which tells you that the Caribbean society has undergone a fundamental cultural shift. They have shifted from a foundation of cooperation to a foundation of competition. That is to say, the propaganda war to condition people has succeeded. Two different models. Both have both competition and cooperation. But which? Do you have cooperation as the foundation and competition as the superstructure? Or do you have competition as the foundation and cooperation as the, right? That is the reality. No, I know, should I say it, you don't, because I say it in 5 minutes. Normally, if I took you through a long lecture for 3 days and give you out a book to read, you would bear it in mind. But I told you that I'm summarizing. I'm summarizing in 2 hours a course that would normally take 3 months. So I'm leaving out a lot of details. I'm giving you the fundamental principles. That is the difference. One set saw cooperation as fundamental, but understood that competition was also important, but competition is the superstructure. The other was reversed. competition was fundamental. Cooperation, you cooperated only when you had to. We cooperated all the time and competed when we had to. They competed all the time and cooperated only when they have to. That's the difference.
Is that in the Caribbean, there were neighborhoods, there were communities. In other words, the football team that I play for, Malvern, comes out of Woodbrook. The behavior, my school, my carnival band comes out of an area of Newtown, Woodbrook. I represent the very best of them. And when I go to the savannah, where everybody is, I am now part of the culture of boys in the savannah playing football or cricket. So there's a certain dignity, there's a certain representation. When you go home, your mother, your father, your neighbors want to know. They don't have to have television. They don't have to have it, but they want to know whether the team from the neighborhood does well. There's a neighborhood policing of children playing in the street and so on. All of that is broken down because all those neighborhoods now have cars, paved parking garages, all the trees cut down,
Fences.
locks on their keys, increased crime, and an individualism, a rugged individualism that has become so corrupt that people have no longer a sense of understanding who they are. So we become all displaced people because half are in America and half are in another part of Trinidad and another part in Barbados. And the next thing you know, there's a collapse of an identity of community. It's the same thing in Southeast, it's the same thing in the displacement with gentrification. So that's what we're looking at. We are really looking at a structure that has been set up from 1980 to the present, to have a disintegration of this thing called city, a disintegration of this place called Harlem, where you could go and hear your music and so on. That's gone, you see. So all of that, I think,
So how do
affects.
we intervene? I think without running towards like in front of you, because you have your strategies. Is it time now to discuss? Should we leave it in terms of like solutions towards the end when we go?
Leave it to the end.
Okay, I got you.
What I'm presenting are the problems.
Okay.
We have to deal with the solution.
Very good.
But please understand, these are problems, and I started out by saying you cannot solve a problem if you don't understand it.
Yeah.
Upton can tell you in the 60s and 70s, we went, everything that I'm doing here, I did in the 60s and 70s to groups. And they went out and handled it in certain ways. You know, and we have a number of schools now that are, you know, came out of that. Some of them survived, some didn't survive, different techniques. Now, this time you may modify technique, but this is not the first, I'm not teaching this for the first time. This is everything that I am telling you and have told you from the beginning. I went through the same thing with groups in the 60s and 70s.
Right. I really appreciated the portion about Patrick Moynihan.
Yes.
Because I remember watching the film Claudine as a child. I grew up in the 70s, and I think I was like right at the tail end of a lot of the virtues that you're talking about that we lost. So I'm saying, so I wanted to know, because it's been a mystery to me, when and who is responsible for taking the discipline out of schools? Because I think that I work in schools, and I think that's the very thing that has created more chaos in those institutions. I was wondering if you had any information about that.
You know, well, you see, these things are not accidents. What we are moving towards, America became great. And one of the reasons why America became great was because they adopted a non-European idea of education for all. Europe never had a concept of education for all. It was education for the elites and training for others. And there's a tremendous difference between education and training. If you look at the budgets of the United States over the last 20 years, there are large amounts of money for training, much smaller amounts of money for education. Education means training people to think, to conceptualize, to think for themselves, and to think in terms of concepts and principles and how to apply them. Training means giving you a specific skill by rote to perform a specific job. Now we are being told that the elites are to be educated, the others are to be trained, and the private sector will each year tell the government what is needed. So if we need plumbers this year, we train plumbers. If next year we need carpenters, we train carpenters. So that we're going to be constantly training and retraining, but we're not going to be educating, because when we gave you a chance to be educated, you got stupid and talk about you want to be equal. That is stupidity. I didn't educate you to become equal. I educated you to behave like in the way I tell you to behave. So you will remember that the first Bush administration, and this one, undertook to destroy what? The Department of Education. You remember that? All of you are old enough, guys, just a couple of years ago. They set out to abolish the Department of Education. Because they're not telling you, but they have now going back, not everybody in America, but certain groups. They want to go back to the original European model, where only the children of the elite are to be educated. Everybody else is to be trained. Right? No. So I say to you, I'm telling you all these things because you cannot solve a problem if you don't understand it. Some people think that these things are happening by accident. The intention is to destroy public education. That's what the voucher system is about. You run, just as how when we want to take over a neighborhood, we run the neighborhood down to nothing. When we run the neighborhood down to nothing, we then go in and condemn it, because the law says if it deteriorates below a certain point, we can condemn it. When we go in and we condemn that neighborhood, the prices of everything go way down. Other people come in and buy it up at this low price, right? And the next time you wake up, all the people who live there can't live there no more. And you ask your parents and grandparents about Southeast, right? I mean, not Southeast, Southwest. We had gas used to be stored in Southwest. And when you went into Southwest, the people's skin were puffed, people were dying of TB, all kinds. We begged, move the gas. They said, no, there is no other place in Washington that we can put the storage tanks. Then the whites decided, damn, this place is nice, it overlooks the river. So they ran it down, bought it out, took these houses, fixed them up and called them townhouses. And the house that they bought for $7,000, they now were selling for $70,000. In those days, $75,000 was a hell of a lot of money. They bought it for $7,000, fixed it up and selling it for $75,000. Within a little time, they went from $75,000 to $100,000. Now it's $200,000, $300,000 in Southwest.
And that's not long ago that there weren't streets in Southwest.
No, we're talking about a few years ago.
In Southwest. I mean, 1968,
right.
There weren't streets in parts of Southwest. We're not talking back in cowboy days.
Right.
I mean, we're talking.
And listen to this. Within 6 months, they found another place to store the gas. For years, they said there was no place where the gas could be stored other than in Southwest. But once this happened, within 6 months, they found another place to store it. And Southwest, then they've done the same thing before in Georgetown.
But I think one must also look at that within the framework of one, that as that happened, the evolution of that was the coming of Walter Washington and Marion Barry. It is not one thing happening at one at a time. No. If you take a serious look at 1988 to the present time, and as you try to deal with elites going to school and poor people not being afforded education or the development, what happened was very simple. One, you develop more community colleges and more technical schools. 2, the cost of education increased precipitously, which made it impossible for people to afford to go to higher education to the elite schools, got up as high as $30,000, $40,000. The cost of private schools, like Sidwell Friends, that allow you to go to Stanford or Harvard, increased enormously. Do you understand what I'm saying? So as they shifted the economics of education, of the cost of education, and they shifted the decision-making process of what respective schools would do, you then end up with the kind of education you have. Then they opened up the jails and opened them up to privatization. So you increase the number of people that would go into jail under the Clinton administration. So you prepare yourself now for 2000 and 2001, where you are now adequately prepared for 1, war, 2, service industry, no longer you need anything else but people working at McDonald's, so you don't have to have any education, and 3, the cost of education eliminating large percentages, 85% of the population, so that people have really no future and no destiny in it. But all these things happen, and while they're happening, you have gentrification, black mayors, black politicians, black everything else between 1988 and 2008. That's how it's a strategy that has several things in its place, and it's not just one.
What actually said, because we have not been trained to look at systems.
Right. We look at one thing.
We look at a single thing. If you want to evaluate, you don't evaluate a single variable. You have to evaluate the system. All right? Now, let me just say this. I'm going to take 2 more questions. Let me say this.
2 more questions, yeah, because we don't want to. We want to salvage him for Monday.
No, it's all right. But I need to tell you, this is factual, so you understand what we're talking about. Athlon is talking about. When in 1954, the Supreme Court ruled in Brown versus Board of Education, if America had chosen to implement Brown versus Board of Education, the problem would have been solved long ago. Instead of that, they instituted a thing called massive resistance. The Southerners introduced massive resistance. Now, let me give you an example in education of Virginia, what Virginia did. Virginia says we're not integrating. Well, never. We are not desegregating our schools. It's a fact, yeah?
Yeah.
Virginia closed all the public schools. All public schools in Virginia were closed. They then gave vouchers, $1,000 to every family for a child to go to school. And they opened up all these private schools. And they said, just as how John Brown had sent his children, black poor people have a right to go to private schools too. And you say, yeah, that's true. So blacks were in favor of that. So they closed all the public schools. They opened up all these private, they call private academies. And they gave everybody $1,000. Now, in those days, you could buy a house, a very good house, for $14,000. If you got $1,000, the salary of the most of blacks working in DC government, right, who are called communication specialists, meaning messengers, was $3,750 per year. Now imagine somebody earning $3,750 per year, and you say to the mother, I'm going to give you $1,000 so you can go to a private school just like the son of the senator and congressman. Oh God, wonderful. What they didn't tell people in advance, that the fee for the school was $3,000. So the blacks went along, everybody went along with the program, and Virginia closed all the schools, gave everybody $1,000. The wealthy had been sending their children to public schools, private schools, so it was just a bonus for the wealthy. The middle class went out and got a second job to try to raise the extra $2,000. And the government created schemes for pushing money to the whites under the table. So we at Howard intervened, and we went to them and said, listen,
That's right.
can 3 families get together, pool the $1,000, and send one child to school? They said, no, the law don't permit that.
That's right.
We said, okay, can each family cash the voucher, get $1,000, and hire a private tutor? They said, no, the law don't allow that.
You see the model up there? Corporation, you see it?
You understand that? All right, now, we're not discussing theory.
That's right.
This happened in Virginia. So whereas if you go back to the statistics and history, it will show that Virginia allocated huge amounts of money for educating all the citizens. A huge percentage of the money was never utilized because black people were not permitted to pool and they were not permitted to cash the $1,000. Now, move forward to 5 years ago, where they proposed the same voucher thing here.
No child left behind.
And now, they said that we're going to give you $5,000. And they go, but first they run the school. They run the school down and they ask you, are you satisfied with the DC? You say, hell no, I'm not. Because you couldn't be. They said, well, therefore, I'm going to rescue you. And I'm going to give you the opportunity to go to a private school, just like the Kennedy children. But this time I'm going to give you 5, because I learned my lesson from Virginia, that 1,000 was not enough, so I'm going to give you $5,000. But they didn't bother to tell you that this time the cost of education is $15,000. The same goddamn formula. They're still giving you 1/3. They gave you $5,000 when the current cost is $15,000. Now, how are you going to raise the other $10,000 to go to a private school?
Per child.
And we have bought into that. And therefore, the monies that should be going to bring public schools up to standard, because every time they give you $5,000, they subtract it from the DC school budget. Now, that is what happens when you don't think in terms of systems.
And also, Leo, when you don't think in terms of what you said there, if you don't teach your child, 25 years later, the same problem will arise and your child will not know. Because one of the things that we don't do in our children, we got to be very, very really. Think of it, our children spend time looking at TV, but ask ourselves whether our children read autobiographies of children, of writers like Richard Wright, or writers like Toni Morrison, where the story starts with the child, with birth. Barack Obama's early life, or The Cat in the Castle of My Skin by George Lamming. Do we read those early lives? And our children have no connection. But we look at Bill Cosby's nonsense on what they call the big fat guy or whatever it is on Saturday morning, Fat Albert and all of that. And we don't let our children read the lives and stories of our people who write autobiographies about their early lives and their journeys. It has no way in our work, not only at home, but not in church and not in school. And part of it, therefore, is the children then redo the whole thing and we have problems that becomes circular. So Pan-Africanists and black people here and around the world get angry when you cannot give them an answer for the now.
Yeah.
Because they feel that in other words, when you come to lecture, you have to tell them how they're going to solve the Pan-African problem now, and not really how they understand the process, the legacy, the movement, and what has to be done in order to be able to solve those problems. So when you tell them, when a parent comes and say, what am I having with my children? You say, throw your television away. They want to kill you because they like the television more than the children.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, let's give them a hand. Thank you, Professor. On Monday, sharp at 7. No excuse, even if it rains. We start sharp at 7. That will be like the last two lectures. The last two lectures, Monday and Wednesday. Okay, Monday and Wednesday. Don't forget Sunday and Thursday. And Sunday and Saturday and Sunday at 3 o'clock, we have the town meeting on the South African issue. Again, we want to make sure we are in charge of the South African issue. Let's not give it away. Let's define it. Let's understand it and go from there. And then poll codes Sunday at 3 o'clock. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm going back to school, actually. This is what's happening. I never thought I would.
I just wanted to let you all know, to thank you for filling out the evaluation forms. The comments that we got last week were really very helpful, and they're going to be helpful throughout the whole series, so thank you for that. And
besides this whole idea, the Academy of Homework, we're thinking of a name for it. Academy of homework, Academy of study, because we're going to continue it the whole year with other lectures. He has one more installment after this, etc. So please, let's keep in touch. And also, please, in your chat rooms, take it. Infect people with the virus of consciousness.